Let's do this.
Okay, Julia laughed. She liked that.
Postponed.
I know some of you will say there has to be a minute between the lowering of the AP and the start of the show. Clark Chapin and some of our other race officer types, but I wanted to get that in. Anyway, welcome. Hello, everybody. Welcome to TFE Live for the Wednesday, an unusual Wednesday show, the 14th of August, 2019, show number 210, and indeed postponed from yesterday. We were going to do our normal Tuesday show, and then there was a lot of breaking news, some of which we'll tell you about in a moment. And then I had the chance to get Alan on today, Alan Block, who's standing by in Beverly Hills, Michigan. Hi, Alan. You with us there?
Good afternoon, Tom. Can you hear me all right?
Yep. Nice to hear you. We'll be back to you in a second. Alan Block, the sailor, lawyer, and journalist, better known as Mr. Clean, and better known by some as the pundit from Sailing Anarchy, but we'll have him live with us in a moment, talking ILCA, talking lasers and everything else. Julia is here with us. Julia, I trust you're well.
I am.
Any news?
Not really.
Have you seen this news?
Which news?
This news right here.
Oh, yes.
Summer has come to San Diego. It's San Diego weather in San Francisco. Hardly a cloud in the sky, hardly any fog. For those of you who are challenged in the Celsius, we even put it up there in Fahrenheit for you. It is San Diego weather. It's south of Portugal weather. It's fabulous here in the Bay Area this week and really into next. Let's get on with it. I want to thank very much these two guys, those who saw the show on Friday. Victor Felice and John Riddell came on live from Phoenix via Skype, and they are the spark plugs behind Tillers and Kites and the Arizona Yacht Club and a lot of the sailing that goes on in what many people think of the Grand Canyon state or the desert state, but it is alive and well with not just land sailing, but I mean with aquatic water, regular yacht racing and sailing. And great to have them on the show. If you haven't been to the website, a few posts over the weekend, we did a replay there. You can see, I get to use it, Julia.
Okay.
Over here, you see the white doesn't show up very well. I got a telestrator. See that clean? Got a bloody telestrator. Huh? Even that brought a smile to his face.
I love telestrators.
So that is a replay. We're now posting to YouTube the shows sometime after we get them. We get off the air. It takes some time to get them uploaded because they're a couple gigabytes. In any event, they're uploaded to YouTube. We put a link on the main website so you can see them there after the fact, as well as watch replays, of course, on Facebook. So if you haven't been over to the site, go do that, please. And you can also, while there, sign up, become a Patreon patron. Click on the orange button if you're so inclined. As I say, some people give us $1, some people give us 10, some people give us 100 a month, some people give us 1,000 a month, don't they, Julia?
They do, and they're devoted.
They are. They're unbelievable. So let's start with a couple Bravo Zulus before we get to Alan Block. But in particular, the U.S. team did quite well down in Lima at Los Juegos Panamericanos. Alan speaks Spanish, I think, better than I. They took place the 26th through the 11th of August, and this team came out with the gold. This is Riley Gibbs and Anna Weiss, auf Deutsch, Anna Weiss, I guess we would say here in the U.S., in the NACRA 17, the foiling NACRA 17 class. That, of course, is the mixed gender required under class and Olympic rules, one male, one female. And they are not only mixed gender, but they are bi-coastal because Riley is from Long Beach and Anna is from Fort Lauderdale. So congrats to them, the gold medalists, and a bit of a surprise. They've been coming on strong. And not only did they win the gold medal, but they qualified the U.S. for a slot at next summer's 2020 Olympics in Tokyo because the countries, there's only 20 countries that get to go sail, give or take. There's a few more in the laser and maybe a couple less in some of the other classes. But you have to qualify your country to to get one of those slots. Then you have to go home, or in whatever the regattas are that your National Olympic Committee have chosen to qualify the representative of your country. So congrats to them for doing that. So at least the U.S. will have a rep in the NACRA 17. Here are the other medalists: Charlie Buckingham, Charlotte Rose. Charlie, of course, he was like bronze, I think, in the laser. Charlotte Rose, silver in laser radial, I believe. I'm not sure that's right. And then there's the gold medalists, Anna and Riley. And then a real surprise, Pedro Pascual. We haven't done very well in the RSX windsurfer. And he was, I think, silver in the RSX. So bravo, Zulu, full marks to all of them. One last result we want to highlight from the Fastnet race, and this was just brilliant. Do you guys, Alan or Julia, do you know what boat that is?
Something big and green?
Julia?
No, I don't.
That is Carina.
Oh, I don't know.
It's a 50-year-old McCurdy and Rhodes boat, and they won the Dorade Trophy for the highest placing classic boat under IRC. I mean, this boat is rates well. It's owned by this guy who's a longtime friend. He and I did an America's Cup campaign, New York Yacht Club's America's Cup campaign together in the America 2 campaign, 85, 6, 7, Frio.
He looks like he belongs at the wheel.
He is a great guy, owns some boatyards in Connecticut, and his name, of course, is Reeves Potts. He's a past Commodore of New York Yacht Club. That, of course, is Fastnet Rock behind him.
I hope that whoever took that photo, Tom, gets a bonus from Commodore Potts, because that's about as iconic a picture as you can get. You'd want that blown up to, 9 feet and put over your fireplace?
It is, and to be honest, I've already cropped it and color balanced it to put it into the show, as I do with a lot of the photos, but it is a wonderful photo, isn't it?
It is.
Amazing.
So just a little more on the achievement. Carina, this is a quote from Reeves, Commodore Potts. Carina is a good boat and has performed well over 5 different rating rules since 1969.
Wow.
We sail as an all-amateur crew, and her design allows us to get her in the groove and keep her close to her maximum performance most of the time. This race really fits well with boats like Carina because owners of classic boats like going out sailing, and the Rolex Fastnet race has such an interesting course in so many ways. The atmosphere at the start, in the Solent off the Royal Yacht Squadron's castle, and at the finish in Plymouth and right across the fleet is fantastic. We may have more varnish than many of the race boats, but we love racing just as much. That was a great quote from Reeves, and bravo Zulu to Commodore Potts and his entire team for winning the Dorade Trophy in the Fastnet race.
Indeed, yeah.
Okay, Alan's also, we talked a little bit about this in the tech check, but as you all probably know, Sail GP ended on Sunday. They had one and only one day of racing. Practice on Friday was abbreviated. If they even went out, I don't really remember now if they even sailed on Friday. There was no racing on Saturday because a half gale or more blew through the southern British Isles and into Europe. And on Sunday, they did race in a lot of breeze, sort of 18 to 25-ish, and it was a rough and tumble regatta in Cowes, one day of racing. The British team, the home favorites, didn't even get around the track. This happened to them, and that causes a lot of damage to these, fragile boats. These F-50s are not built to go, nose down. Dive. What do you think of that, Alan?
I think the Sail GP folks are starting to see the folly of trying to save money by having fewer days racing, because you end up costing a lot of money and things like that happening because you have to rush, because you have to squeeze it all in. What are you going to do? If they didn't get that racing in on the final day, that's nothing, zero for the whole weekend. Yeah,
indeed. And that's what a lot of us have been saying, that Russell trying to squeeze us down to just 3 days, a day of practice and then 2 days of racing is, especially in places like the Solent, where you can get anything, any time of the year, you can have this kind of weather. So here's a good video produced by Sail GP, wrapping up last Sunday's racing, and then I'm going to show you World Sailing's video to see what you think of each. Have a look and a listen.
had a big crash, and I don't know if it was any worse than the other guys, but ended up doing too much damage to the boat that we had to stop racing for the day. I think we need to just get over that and just make sure we have some good racing, because we saw in the practice races we're capable of winning, but not when our boat's not in one piece.
We felt good. I mean, we felt really good until the point where we capsized. You know, we were definitely, you got to push it and this stuff. You know, you got to keep your apparent wind, you got to keep the boat ripping. You can't really take your foot off the throttle, so we didn't, and it bit us.
It was pretty cool on the last race because the water was more flat and we can push on the boat as you can, and it was great. We need to push him more on the last event in Marseille. We will be better for sure.
I'm pretty happy with where we've got to at this stage. We ticked off a few good goals this week of doing dry laps, and Marseille's around the corner now, and we'll be really looking to perform there and show our best side, and hopefully it'll be some beautiful little conditions, 14 to 16 knots, and we can show off our skills and what we've learned over the year.
Was full on today. It's a type of day where you really are relying on your experience and your skills. We're excited, we were pumped to do the race, and you know, one unfortunate jibe and a broken pedestal meant that we were handicapped the whole day. I don't know how we got second and 2/3 with the boat not really functioning at all, but the boys just wanted to get some points on the board, and we had a great time, and can't wait for the sail home.
Certain times when you can't back off, you need to actually push harder in those conditions, and fortunately for us, we got through those zones, and yeah, we stayed on our feet.
Australia, there it is, 3 from 3, awesome job.
And they touched 50 knots.
Feels good to have this result going into Marseille, but as we know, it's winner takes all in Marseille, a one match race final, and more money on the line than any of us have ever won before. It'll be all on.
Okay, I like the video. I like the music. Full marks to the Aussies, Tom Slingsby, who won all 3 races. There were a lot of comments that said, geez, this is just boring and kind of not very competitive. But again, that's the conditions. That's the fragility of these boats. And let's look at this other video. This is a world sailing video. They do their 1-minute summary, and I think they do quite a good job. But you be the judge. Have a look at this. Okay, Alan, you're a journalist. You are a video producer. You have been. You write. You're a bloody lawyer, so you write. What'd you think of those? Compare and contrast those 2 videos for us.
I like the porn music on the World Sailing one. You can see who's spending the money on some good music. And I don't know who did the World Sailing one, but Matt Knighton's been running the media program for Sail GP, and his fingerprints are all over that cut for Sail GP. And those are both really good videos for very different reasons, and it looked like a lot of fun in this one, at least for the day they were able to get in.
Okay, let's take a close up here. We'll look at the augering in and the capsize, the augering in that led to the capsize by Rome Kirby and his U.S. team. Now, this happened right after the first mark, the reaching mark. They reach across at a high rate of speed, and then they have to do this bear away in front of, they always try to set it up so it's in front of the stands, the grandstands on the beach and the people sitting on the beach. That is the first mark, and because the bear away is very scary, you have to bear away and try to keep the bows from digging in from just every catamaran. It's the same because you've got all that up in the top of the rig, all the force is up in the rig, and then all the drag is down in the hull. So it's always trying to go ass over tea kettle. And they did. They managed to right it, and they went racing and didn't do very well. And there were some problems in the boat, no doubt. But Alan, what sayeth you about all that?
Well, I mean, I think Rome and the team are their goal. They don't have a chance of winning, this series. Their goal is to go out there and learn and try and learn how to manage a program, how to race at a high level and compete against some of these guys that just don't have the chops to compete. But they're out there and having a good time. The shame is that there's not more battles in these races. But everyone seems to be learning a little bit given the restricted time they have to practice with the boats. There's no bigger learning curve in the world than a 50-knot foiler. Come on.
Well, and exactly. And I like the fact anytime somebody like Larry, and especially Larry, likes to pour tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars into the sport, benefiting all these professional sailors, the media people, the race management people. It's money into the sport, and I hope it takes off. I hope that people, both sailing and non-sailing alike, grab onto it, are stimulated, are interested in it, and there's a big following. But the numbers so far, Alan, as you know, have not been real great.
It's a massive uphill battle. I mean, you can probably pull it off if you have a good enough product and you can pedal it for enough years to build. But the building just doesn't really seem to happen. Seem to really be happening. But you know what? Look, people inside say that there's a 3-year commitment. They're already a year in to the spend, and if Larry spends the same amount and the sponsors who they do have spend the same amount for 2 more years, and they get some great conditions, and maybe they get some viral videos, and maybe they get some more big media, and they've had some. Maybe it'll succeed. I mean, if you want to do an odds, lay some odds, I'll definitely take the they won't succeed side for as much money as you'll let me bet.
Well, I don't generally bet money, but I'm happy to bet a dinner the next time we're both together. Let's say in a couple of years' time, we'll give it 3 years, see how it goes. But the next time we're both in Michigan, and maybe or you're out here in San Francisco, so we can drag Julia along too, and have a dinner. We can do it out at Portage Yacht Club. But Rome Kirby, there's some spectacular stuff. It's fun to watch, kind of NASCAR style. Kind of, if they ain't rubbing, they ain't racing. But the yacht racing is a bit of a yawner, and it was again this weekend.
Here's what you see. When it works really well. The problem is it rarely works. And we saw the same thing with the Cup, when they're, for whatever reason, they happen to be evenly matched, which is so rare, even with identical boats, but when they happen to be evenly matched, it's so exciting, it's terrifying, it makes you jump out of your seat. It's just that seems to happen like once or twice a season.
Okay, Alan, I want to stop here. There's a lot of people on here, and a lot of your fans, I'm sure. Chris Exley says, hi, Clean. Ben Nichols, I met Alan in Gdynia last year in Poland. A great promoter of all that is sailing. Pedro Foiling Sailor. I don't know if you know Pedro Foiling Sailor. His original name was Peter, and then he's a laser sailor who almost did die technically in Mexico during, I think, a laser masters, and they brought him back to life. He changed his name to Pedro because he figures he's on his second
rebirth.
Is that it, Julie? He figures he's on his born again second life, and he's on in Australia where it's bloody early in the morning, 5 or maybe 6 in the morning now. Hi, Pedro. There's a 10-second delay between the iPhone and the laptop. We'll watch on laptop. Okay, well, the serving, this live streaming stuff, webcasting stuff is brand new, last couple of years, and it goes up to Facebook, and then how it gets distributed through their servers is all a mystery to me, but it does happen. We're experimenting with YouTube. We may shift over to YouTube or to both, but we'll see. Bernie? I
got to tell you, Tom, I like a lot of people, I've just been trying to stay away from Facebook more and more, especially as I'm in less of a public life than I was. And for a lot of people who don't need to be on Facebook for business or whatever, they're trying to get away from it too for privacy reasons. Now, I don't know if YouTube is significantly better or worse, but I feel more comfortable using it. I was real happy to be able to watch your recent show with the Laser Performance CEO on YouTube rather than have to go to Facebook. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, and you long ago suggested that we should be, you and frankly a number of others, Andy Green said, it's easier for a lot of people to find it on YouTube. There are these streaming services that allow you to stream to multiple sites at the same time, and we'll no doubt be going to that as well as posting on YouTube. Alex Saldana, first of all, Bernie Stegmeyer is in Switzerland. Alex Saldana is down in Brazil, and this is our worldwide audience, as you know, Alan, in part thanks to you. Max Hunt from the UK is checking in. There's a new name. Do you know Max Hunt?
I don't know. I'd have to see what kind of boat he sails.
I remember telling jokes in hockey in Michigan about Mike Hunt, but this is Max Hunt. Bill Canfield, Lima did a fabulous job on the games. Bill, of course, Taylor's dad was down at the games. Thanks for that, Mr. President. He's the president of the U.S. Virgin Islands Sailing Association. Ben Nichols, Charlotte Rose will medal at the Olympic Games someday soon. Now, Ben is a famously good laser coach. Do you know Ben? Laser coach from the UK and sailor and everything laser. Bill Canfield, Maggie and Steph also got a silver in FX in Lima. Yeah.
Nice.
Indeed. Hi, Tom, and what's up, Clean? That's Josh Toso, who is the marketing director.
Josh.
And Josh, we've gotten to know, and I think does quite a good job for U.S. Sailing. And he texted me this morning and said, if you're going to have Clean on, I can't miss it. I'm going to watch it live. They're all expecting you to say or do something. I'm not sure what, Alan.
I'm so boring these days. You wouldn't even believe it, Tom.
We're going to talk to you about what you're really doing. Wayne Schreck and 26 other people are watching along. There's another new name, Lee Verschuren. Cool. Mr. Clean on the episode. The new Hugo Boss also on today. Now, we are going to do a segment on that new boat. That is a cool boat, the Imoca 60, that has just been launched. Zach, go ahead, Alan.
We call her Pinky already.
Well, it's got all that pink trim. It's kind of cool looking, isn't it?
Nothing wrong with pink.
Okay.
Hot pink.
There we go. Julia, be careful. This guy knows more jokes than I do, sexual and otherwise.
I didn't do it. I didn't say anything.
Zach Berman is on from the UK. Wayne Schreck. Wow. Anderson Reggio. Now, there's a cool guy. Peter's son, who's doing great work as a race officer and as a weather guy and so on. Kent Pulliam, and coaching, too. Blake McDermott. Bill Wingrove, Sail GP. Now, Bill is a dean of yachting in many respects down in the Tampa Bay area. Davis Island Yacht Club. He says, Sail GP, meaning falling asleep. Stingray. You know Stingray was a fan of yours and a friend of both of us from up in Seattle, a big sailing anarchist. Cows was overkill, just like San Francisco, perfect for these boats. So he liked that. Hamish Nickel, Joan Winston, World Sailing Video was better, more information. I like the fact that it's titled and there's not voicing over it, because the voice can be distracting. I like to watch the pictures, watch the titles, but some people prefer it the other way around. Thanks for that, Joe.
Also remember, guys, that's those are made for two very different reasons.
Well, yeah, and explain why. Exactly right.
Well, think about it. I mean, the call to action in Matt's video and the Sail GP video is to download the app. They want you to download the app. So what they're doing is they're showing you what you see in the app: the racing, the interviews, the public interest stuff, the training. That's what they're going to give you in the app. I think. I don't know. I don't have it, but the World Sailing thing is to go out to the World Sailing mailing list and go up on World Sailing's Facebook page and just sort of show people an interesting side of the sport. Just two very different audience intentions.
Exactly right. And the app's quite good, by the way. I don't like all the bells and whistles, but to watch it on the app is quite convenient. You can watch it on Facebook, depending upon where you are in the country, in the world, rather. Tom Fishbeck, Georges Bonella Dupuis, the rear commodore of the Royal Malta Yacht Club, is on from Malta, presumably. Stingray says those conditions make for eye candy, windy winds. Mason Sheen, Cameron Dunn, Cammy Dunn, hell of a good sailor. Hi, Cam. Sail GP already has more teams coming for season 2. Yes, we understand there will be more than 6 teams. We'll see how many regattas there are. Jeff Dreschler is watching, and here's Will comms director for New York Yacht Club's American Magic. Welcome to you, Will. And we're going to be talking about the Cup in a minute. Lee Verschuren, yeah, he says YouTube. Verschuren, I hope I pronounced your name right, Lee. Warren Schasser, good morning, Tom and Julia. Ann Fosey, Friends of Sailing Illustrated. Rick Myers, Hamish Nickel, By Baldridge. Now, there's a hell of a good sailor, too, Olympic medalist. So Susie Hawkins, Joan Winston. YouTube is easier to decouple from other things, Joan is saying. Jeff Dreschler, Lee Verschuren. So many streamers do YouTube, better find, better chat. Yeah, that's the other thing, is that once you're on YouTube, it starts referring you more easily to your other videos, your previous videos, other similar videos, and so on. So there's a lot of reason to do YouTube. The chatting, the reason we didn't start on YouTube is because they didn't have this kind of chat. We couldn't look through our list of 70 or 80 people that are on here live, and now they do, and now it's pretty good live streaming chat as well on YouTube. Leandro Spina, hi, and Lee Verschuren is in the Netherlands. David Price, presumably down in Australia. Hi, Pricey. Alex Hayworth, the coverage of the sport has not been the same since Alan took a break. That's Alex Hayworth. Clean, what do you think of that?
That's very sweet, Alex. I wish it wasn't the case, but I think you're kind of right. It wasn't necessarily me, but a whole bunch of things changed. Me and Petey, we're talking about it this week, and my longtime producer, the Rev. Petey Crawford, and a Scow superstar and the Wyzetta Yacht Club kid. Me and Petey were talking just the other day. We were looking at some videos while we were sailing together at the J70 Nationals up in Harbor Springs, and we just looked at each other like no one's done anything new in 6 years. I mean, really. And it was a little depressing, and then we went back to sailing and drinking and having a great time. So. And I didn't have to edit any video.
Editing, that's why we like to do the live, because for all its warts, good, bad, or indifferent, it's up, it's done. And they've failed to get on the air again over at St. Francis today, or they did, and it's been a cluster. But last week they didn't get on the air, and they were videoing all three cameras. They were recording all three cameras, then going back and having to put them into video editing software. It's a pain, isn't it, Alan?
You can spend all night doing that just to do an hour-long show easily.
Indeed. Okay, who else? Just quickly here, because there's so many people on here. Don McIntyre, hi from Tonga, the Ocean Globe Race, Whitbread 50th anniversary, retro ordinary boats, real sailors, real heroes, huge following all around the world already, low-tech, great show. Thanks, Don McIntyre. Ben Nichols, Max Hunt is a legend. He helps laser sailors the world over. Isn't that the great thing about our sport? You get guys like Gus Miller in the Finn class and Buddy Malgus, who's helped everybody, irrespective of whether he was in the Star or the FD or the Solo. Tell me what. Don Logan is watching. Hi, Don. Susie Hawkins, we mentioned. Johnny Durkin, Stingray. Mike Hunt is very talented and sought after. Okay, Stingray, keep it clean. Owen Miller, Lee Verschuren, the Hugo Boss name, Pink Panther. Thomas Simmons, the esteemed director of that movie. What was the? Remind me the name of the movie, Alan.
Coyote.
Coyote. Well done, Julia.
Coyote. Sure.
Yep. Ken Saban, Pedro Foiling Sailor. Alan is a top bloke. Met at the Moth Worlds in Melbourne. Although in 2009, Sailing Anarchy felt that the foiling laser was
photoshopped.
Oh, it was photoshopped. No, I've seen. In fact, you sent me. Pedro, you sent me a video which I haven't run because it's a few years old, of that foiling laser, which frankly only goes on a reach, and I guess it goes back and forth on a reach. But there's a lot of other cool foiling boats. The Wasp, obviously the Moth. Alan, have you sailed a Wasp or a Moth?
I've sailed a Moth several times. I have not sailed a Wasp, but I've sailed a lot of foiling boats. There's all sorts, and those lasers, there's a couple lasers out there. There's a foiling opti out there. There's all sorts of weird stuff. Old tech now.
Yeah. Manuel Gomez, Mo Moreno, Brent Bacon, Bill Wingrove. Met clean at the Volvo stopover in Miami a few years back. Got me on the Volvo VIP boat. Bill. Coyote, the Mike Plant story. Thanks, Alan, for your support of Coyote. Yep. Steve Pickle, Susan Watson Kennedy, Owen Miller. Alan, you have a face. Come on, you said the same thing about me, Owen. He says you have a face for radio. That's what Andy Rose and I say every time we do the Gov Cup coverage. Bjorn Westergaard is what?
I need one of those pictures with the Fastnet light behind me. Can you Photoshop me into that picture of Reeve Potts?
You bet. I'm going to
All right,
I'm going to get it. Hang on.
I got a face for the back of a Fastnet rock for sure.
I'm going to get a screen grab of you right now here on my monitors, and I'll put you.
Oh yes.
That's perfect. Bjorn Vestergaard is watching from Sweden. Britt Ward in Annapolis. Jan Peter Anderson, who's also, I think, a Scandahuvian. Jones Stingray says Tom too. Thanks a lot. We're gonna out Stinger. We're gonna tell the world what his real name is sometime. He says he's gonna come on the show and out himself. He's a superb software engineer up at Boeing in Seattle. One of the brightest guys we know. Leslie Ryan is watching.
We had a few drinks in Valencia back in the day.
Yeah, he's been a big Cup fan and carrying on. Okay, Alan, let's talk about you for a minute. Before we get into the laser stuff, update us on you. What's going on? You're back living in Michigan. So
I went racing. You showed those pictures before of me and my little daughter. I got a last minute invitation from my old friend Petey, along with Sean Hendrickson, who everyone in Minnesota calls Sean Man, and he's another Scow legend, Scow Billy, and another guy called Rob, who there's the team Rasta J70. And there's me and my daughter with her first little yellow perch. I got invited to join the J70 Corinthian National Championship. So no pros at all, no coaches, no coaching during the day and stuff. And then they do a really welcoming environment with after race briefings from all the different sailmakers and numbers. And they bring up the guys who did well on the day and have them, talk about what they did. Very, very nice atmosphere. And I went racing for 3 days plus a practice day and a half, and it was spectacular. It was great stuff. So that was most recently, Tom. And
hang on, Al. Compare now and contrast that race. Now that was up in Traverse City or Harbor Springs, which for those of you who are not Michiganders, you can always tell people from Michigan, as we joke on this show, because they get the hand up and they tell you where they're from. Alan's over here near Detroit. I grew up just a little bit outstate near Ann Arbor, and then up here near the Little Finger on the west coast is the Garden. I mean, it's one of the most beautiful places in the country in the summer, Harbor Springs.
It's spectacular
and great sailing.
It's like nothing people have ever experienced. And like the shock of people coming over from Minnesota and Wisconsin who'd never sailed harbor at that incredible sea breeze every day. It's very much like Banderas Bay near Puerto Vallarta. Every day it's sort of 12 to 17 knots. It pops up before noon. And you just have these incredible, glorious conditions in water that's as crystal clear as the Caribbean, waves building 2 to 5 feet. And fresh water that you could draw. You probably shouldn't drink, but you could.
you better go to work for the Michigan Chamber of Commerce or that Michigan Pure Michigan campaign.
Tom, it was like you say, it was like a giant playground. The beach. My daughter's at the beach building sandcastles right in front of the race course. Everything looks so picture perfect. The DeVosses own an entire private marina there with about $40 million of classic yachts just stacked up. Everything, it's so beautiful that you can't even believe it. And I had the time of my life. It's been a long time since I raced hard in one design, and this was a good weekend.
Well, compare and contrast now that Corinthian regatta. How many boats were there?
36 finally on the line.
So compare that to, say, hard bitten, full on pro, Melgus 24 or 32.
Well, you can compare it straight to J70s because I did a couple of Worlds campaigns in the J70 Open class. And a Corinthian boat will very rarely be even in the top 10 in an open class. But the other thing is that there were, I think until the last day when there was actually a boat hold, there were no protests, which is shocking for a J70 fleet. There's usually a very long list of protests. And there were no protests except for, like I said, a damage issue. And they're genuinely, Tom, you and I have talked about pros in the sport for a long time. We've sort of been in and around and part of the whole system. And you can't argue with the fact that the people that were there were getting better, enjoying it, not getting dispirited, and the level was there was a lot of parity. There was a lot of battles. There wasn't those teams that are a leg behind like there is at other kinds of open world championships or something like that.
And the biggest difference I find, and I love pro sailing. I think the high end of the sport. God knows I've done the America's Cup, which is for 14 editions. And Larry Ellison helped put Meg through college, thank goodness, and so on. But the difference, I think, for recreational, the recreational level of the sport is that you go to a regatta like this, whether it's the J70 Corinthians or the Flying Scots or the Thistles or the Snipes or the Lightnings, and you don't have the feeling like it's checkbook racing. You don't have the feeling like you're having to write big checks or to race against people who have been writing big checks, practicing for a week or two with different sails from different sailmakers, bringing in professional sailors, full-time paid coaches, chase boats and ribs and coach boats and so on. That's the big difference, isn't it, Alan?
It's a huge difference. I mean, guys can spend $50,000-$70,000 on a national championship on a 3-day regatta easily in the open level. But yeah, in this case, everyone was trying to stay, Airbnbs and people staying with friends, and all the yacht club, the LTYC opened up their members opened up and let people stay with them, and it just felt good, even in a bit of a bougie city like Harbor Springs.
What did you call it? A bourgeois city?
A little bougie, yeah.
A bougie. It is. Bougie. It's an upscale town. It's a kind of an upscale summer resort town.
But it's so gorgeous. But Tom, I'm gonna tell you one thing. You'll get a kick out of this. So all week, the guy winning was a guy named Scott Sellers, who I think is local up there, and he was sailing with 5 on a J70, which is a lot. But one of them was his 70-pound 12-year-old daughter on the Traveler, and another one was his 100-pound daughter on the bow. And it was a great story for a Corinthian national championship, family program, the whole deal, beating some great guys and so on and so forth, guys who've done well with pros in open competition who came to this championship without their pros. So it's a great story. And I didn't even look at the final results because we were sort of a little bit below mid-fleet, nothing special, having our issues, but, learning and having a good time. So I didn't pay much attention. Well, I get home, I look at the winner, I look at the crew list, and I'm like, hold on a second. I know this name because I've interviewed this guy at a Olympic 49er World Championship who was representing Brazil with Marco Grail, Torben Grail's, right? So I'm sitting there wondering, I'm like, this is a Corinthian thing. So I don't think he's the cousin of the guy who won from Wisconsin or whatever it is, So what's going on here? So I start doing a little research, and at least from what I understand, the guy is just turned 24 on Monday, which means he was under 24 during the regatta, which means that even if he's a full-time pro, which I believe he is, I mean, I just pulled him up sailing for Ica Martinez in the GC32s at Palma Vela, so he's no amateur. Yeah. But if you're under 24, under World Sailing rules, you usually are a Class 1,
yep.
Or a Category 1. But I just, you know what I mean? This kid Carlos is an amazing kid. He's the 3-time 29er world champion, and then has been trying to represent Brazil in the most recent quad, but a real performer. And he's trimming the kite for this team out of wherever it is, or whatever, who won. So it was a little depressing because unless there's a really good reason for that's about as far outside the spirit of a Corinthian championship as you can get. I'm going to go get a pro trimmer, and who will be a Cat 3 in 6 days. But because he's 23 3/4, I'm going to put him on my boat, and that's going to be my Corinthian, Yeah. So I don't know the deal, and I'm not, look, it was a hard regatta. A trimmer doesn't change everything, but for the most part, at least, there was not that feeling that if that guy beat you, he did it because he spent more money.
Yeah, and the kid exemption is for a whole lot of reasons, because of kids that are being paid to run junior programs and so on, and they don't want to be considered pro sailors just because they're getting paid to teach and so on. But
yeah, this is probably pretty far off that situation.
Yeah, it is, and
but I just got a kick out of it that, like, even in this thing that's all Corinthian and sweetheart and kumbaya, there's still people that are getting right to the edge of the rules.
They're shaving it, carving it pretty close. Alan, Stingray up in Seattle is saying clean is on fire. We're getting thumbs up, and people are putting heart or hearts and also fire emoticons, I guess you call them. I'm too old to use the word emoticon. Chris Watts, Marcos Weinstein, Mark Corsi is watching. Hi, Mark. Allie D. Nuss. You know Allie.
Hi, Allie.
She is top notch. We've had her on the show by via recording. We couldn't get her live because she's like you. She's a working lawyer and banker, and she's busy and tries to sail in her few moments that she has off. Clark Chapin, the Melgus 24 North Americans, is up in that neck of the woods, Grand Traverse Yacht Club in Traverse City this week. A practice race tomorrow, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Melgus 24 North Americans, that is. And Clark must be, he's probably up there on the jury. Clark is past commodore of our club there in Michigan, where you've been.
Here's my phone. It hasn't started ringing yet.
Did you hear that, Clark? He needs an invite. He'll drive up there to the Melgus 24 North Americans up in that corner of Michigan, Traverse City. Little Traverse Yacht Club or Traverse City, Grand Traverse Yacht Club, one of those. Mark Corsi, interesting. Stingray, sailing. Tom, the video I sent was this is Pedro Foiling Sailor down in Australia. I sent was a Melgus 14, not a laser being sailed by a young Bermudan boy at Lake Garda. Okay, well, that's an internet. We'll look at that video again. I'll put it on, Pedro, I'll put it on just for good value. Peter says he's really changed his name to Pedro. Didn't that what you said, Julia?
I think he told us that when he first told us the story.
Yeah. Well, we had him on one time via Skype or phone one time from Sydney, briefly. Matt Knighton Matt Knighton's watching. Matt wants to know, Alan, he says, where's your plastic cup of vodka? Hashtag boat feed. Oh, it's not a plastic cup.
And it's vodka mixed with Zevia stevia soda.
You know, being on, I was telling you in the tech check.
Good eyes, Matt.
We've got, hi Matt. We've gone to, I've always been low carb, but now we've done both Julie and I and a number
You're
of
eating
others.
like whole animals now, right?
Well, exactly. Now we've gone. I mean, Julia's lost 15 pounds. I've lost that much as well, and we've gone from low carb to zero carb to now carnivore, eating only meat and fish, dairy, animals, and things from animals. I
think the next step after that, Tom, is that you have to kill everything that you eat yourself.
Well, you could do that if you lived in Michigan. I mean, we used to have roadkill meals all the time in Michigan.
You would lose a lot more weight if you had to kill it yourself.
If I had to, I'd for sure lose a lot more weight. I'd never eat. And they make fun of me, Alan, because I always have. They think it's Kahlua and something, but it's just iced coffee. It's very boring, because we learned to drink that during the '87 Cup in Australia when it's hot as hell in Perth in the morning before the sea breeze comes in.
I also see you've got your croutons at the ready.
Oh, we always have the croutons.
Just in case.
Just in
Yes,
case.
we do.
We always have the croutons. We don't use them very often, but now I spilled some coffee here on my mouse, for God's sakes. Okay, Alan, what else are you up to? Tell us about your legal career, about the bar, exams.
Well, that's the thing is, like, you're talking about all this news, and I missed a lot of it because starting July 1st, I was in full 100% mode to study for the Michigan bar because I'd like to get licensed here in Michigan so I can work with a firm or a couple firms that are here and that I can have a good living with and that I enjoy the people. So I went to the woods in northern Michigan up near Munising to a friend's deer camp and studied around a fire for a little more than a week. And I sort of found these quiet places and stuck my head in about 7,400 pages of books and learned everything I could learn about Michigan law because I passed the California bar and the Michigan bar has nothing to do with it. So
it's that different.
Yeah, they test you on the differences from standard law of other states. So a lot of things that are really intricate to Michigan, family law and the no-fault system and wills and trusts and things like that, and probate, how it works here. Really super boring stuff that I will never, ever use most likely because that's not how law works. You do a project, you work on a case, and you learn everything you need to learn about the case and what's updated, what the law is that's relative. You learn it each time you do the stuff.
Once the law specific to that case, once you're on a case.
Exactly, and because things change all the time, you always have to update yourself anyway. So it's not like you walk around with all this legal encyclopedic knowledge in your head that you could just spout and be accurate.
What kind of law are you practicing or going to practice?
Lately, I've been doing a lot of contract work for friends who do complex transactions, so mergers and acquisitions and construction loans and licensing agreements and multi-party sort of software deals, stuff like that. Again, super boring, but for someone who's always been a writer, I enjoy it. I like writing long, complicated documents. It's kind of like playing puzzles,
Okay, well, speaking of legal puzzles, we got Katie Pettibone, Chris Shett, who's a lawyer, as I'm sure you know, here in California. Hey, Mike Gebhardt's on. Gebby Kites. Hi to you,
Gebby.
Mike. Yeah, he's on watching. He often comes on watching. It's an interesting mix of people that come on the show, Alan, because it's people from literally from all over the world, at least that are awake, from roughly Central Europe to Australia, and then you get a lot of bright, high-end, not only people, but sailors, top-notch sailors who come on, and they like to hear what's going on. They like to hear the discussion. Speaking of which, Tom O'Keefe is watching. Allie D. Nuss is High Clean. Blake Middleton, who's a terrific guy up in Scout Country. He's in Lake Minnetonka. Do you know Blake?
I do.
Another great guy. He used to work for us at US.
Fascinating life.
Yeah, and a survivor of some tough health things. And Steve Gruber. Allie D. Nuss, there's now also Stevia Tonic, water for gin and tonic. Yay. Stevia Tonic, sugar-free tonic. In any event, so I didn't finish that thought. Since we started doing all this strange zero-carb carnivore stuff, a good friend told me to stop drinking wine. There's too much sugar in wine. If you're doing even a glass of wine, red or white, you should drink. The best thing to drink if you're on a low-carb, if you're drinking at all, you're supposed to drink water and nothing else, but it's not really a diet. It's a eating protocol. You're supposed to drink tequila and soda.
Good tequila.
You could just drink vodka. You can drink vodka too. Works the same.
It does. It does. Well, let's get. Hey,
I
got the laser thing teed up here because everybody wants to hear what's going on with that.
You can also drink whiskey though. Don't forget whiskey, tequila, or vodka, and you're good on your diet.
Oh, is that right?
Yep.
Well, I've never been much of other than a wine drinker, but you have to kill what you eat, but you are naked and only armed with a pointed stick. That's what Steve Gruber says. No, Steve, I'm not going to do that. Jack Bush, Peter sang, hi, Peter, Owen Miller, Gravity. Lamberto Cesare is watching. Lamberto Cesare. Hi, Lamberto. Rafa Trujillo.
So, Alex Saldana's.
Yeah, I'm going to go back up to his comment. Victor Felice at 114 degrees in Phoenix. Victor was on the show last Friday. I can still pay attention because I'm sure he's in aircon someplace. Ed Furry, Bill Allen. Bill Allen, there's a great Olympic medalist and great sailor. Steve Gruber, best diet ever. Huh? Paul Homchick, there are no cabs in dry wine. No carbs, I think he meant. Jody Shields, I think your sailing show has a drinking problem. Do you know who Jody Shields is?
Sure I do. Jody is the commentator for the Sail GP.
He is, and I think he's doing a crack up job. Just a terrific.
Do you remember what his pseudonym was?
Well, he was Bang the Corners. He was Bang the Corners website.
Do you remember what his pseudonym was?
You mean on Sailing Anarchy?
No, on Bang the Corners. He was Randy Cunningham.
Oh, that's right. Randy Cunningham. That's not quite as good as Mike Hunt, but it's almost. Alex Saldana down in Brazil. Tom, I hate conspiracy theories, but what's all happening in the laser class? Come on. First, the problem was with the Australian boats. Okay, I'm not going to read through your whole thing. Alex, I'm going to ask Alan to let me go through these slides now to give a brief intro. As you all know, the laser class has been Olympic since 70-something, 6, and has 70. When was it become Olympic? 90-something. It was invented back in the 70s. I had a laser. I mean, I moved from the Sunfish to the laser almost the time that it came out. It's a I think that's Charlie Buckingham, by the way. Great shot. The laser class, as we broke the news a week ago Friday, on August 2nd, we told you that I had heard from several sources that the class not only had an overwhelming number of people vote, triple the largest number of votes they'd ever had, but that they had many more than the 2/3 necessary to change the Constitution to allow them to decouple the class from the trademark holders. And we broke that news on Sailing Illustrated, and people poo-pooed, so you don't know what you're talking about. Well, believe me, we don't. When I do a one here's, when I do something like that, I triple check the sources, and we're very, very careful, because if you just blow one, even by 60-40 instead of 95-5, getting it 95% right, you're going to lose your credibility, and then Julia will be mad at me too, right?
I will.
Even the people who don't like it know that whatever you say is backed up by at least a couple insiders, Tom.
Well, one can only hope, and people, it's amazing. People are very helpful, and they want to show that they know what's going on, and we hear it all day, every day, and also we get people, Alan, as you know, we get people who will feed us stuff purposely wrong to see it, not only just to get that publicized, but to try to make us look like idiots. So we're really, really careful, and we were again on this thing. This finally came out 10 days later on the August 12th. The class, we told you this last week, the proposed change to the class rules, yada, yada. And they said that the currently confirmed votes, the result was 81-19. And then they said, but we expect it's going to slide a bit as we compare to see the voting lists with the class membership to see that it's all copacetic, and it slipped to 79-21. Now we think it may be down to 69 something. But they did apparently get the necessary votes. World Sailing then, at their board meeting on August 5th, said, okay, this looks like it's going in the right direction. They've signed the papers. And as I have been saying all along, there's no way the laser's going to get the flick from the Olympics. They'll sort all these problems out some way, somehow, because the boat is so popular. And even when the board at this last meeting in May of World Sailing, and when the subcommittee that was doing the evaluation of the other boats came back and said, oh, we want to use the RS Aero, the council properly, and no surprise to me at all. A lot of people were surprised. I didn't think, we said there's no way that's going to go. The laser's going to be in, because it's so broadly, it's not the greatest boat in the world. There are other boats that are better, but it's so by now broadly distributed in small countries, large countries, small clubs, large clubs. It's all over the place. So I don't know if it was 69-31. We're going to ask you, Alan, to tell us, and also tell us about ILCA, whether this boat is going to get renamed, the class is going to get renamed the ILCA. Tell us, sir, what's the deal?
I think, Tom, I think the final vote does end up right around 80-20. And I think it surprised everybody. Not necessarily that the ballot measure won. And I think, again, the measure is to change the definition of the word builder in the class constitution, the rules, which essentially allows anyone to build a boat that's approved by the class and sail in the ILCA championships. It makes the IP ownership, the ownership of the name Laser, sort of superfluous to the whole project. So, but again, Tom, I think everyone was a little shocked at the numbers, and I know that the class has an independent auditor coming in to make sure that everything's above board, because already we're hearing claims from other parties that things were rigged. There's that Optimist blog published a statement that the vote was rigged, and I didn't see any evidence, but I did see that allegation.
Yeah,
so
that's Jean-Pierre Keekins up in Montreal, who's been on the show a couple times and is a FOSI, friend of Sailing Illustrated. And I don't think he said the vote was rigged. He just pointed out that it is easy using something like SurveyMonkey, which they use to do the voting. It's easy for the person that is administering the vote, to see what's going on and even change the vote while it's going on, because it's a surveying platform. It's not, it's not like they hired Julia to go off and conduct some kind of a vote with a different independent system. But it's their vote. It's their class. Their class can take the vote. And as you said, I guess I wasn't surprised they won. They got the 66%, because I think it makes sense for everybody involved, and I think somehow they will sort out the IP issues with Farzad Rastiger and with Performance Sailing Australia and Performance Sailing Japan. But their other problem, they got a couple other problems, Alan. By the way, full disclosure, I've had Tracy Usher on here. I haven't had him on. I've tried to get him on. But he's written a couple editorials, which we've run on the site. He has a standing invitation to come on. We've had Mr. Rastiger on and had a long talk and very, I thought, interesting and illuminating. People didn't believe a lot of the stuff that he said on our show, but he also, I think, was very truthful about some things and surprised people with what he did say. And what's your connection, if I may ask, to all of this in a professional or any? Do you have any kind of a personal interest in all this?
No, I don't have any connection at all right now. I consulted with the ILCA at the outset of this on strategy, and then I had to go take the bar. So,
okay, so you're no longer you're not connected. You did help them in the beginning a little bit.
Yeah, but I know a lot of the players that are involved here, and I followed this really closely in part because the legal aspects of this stuff always fascinated me. When the first lawsuit rolled around with Farzad and Kirby and that whole mess, I followed it as a something of a legal, I don't know. I'm just interested in it. Even when I wasn't practicing, it was interesting, And then when Rastigar sort of brought all this public eye on him and his businesses with the McLaren debacle and the lawsuits and the bankruptcies and stuff, like it was interesting as someone who was working inside the sport as a journalist. So I covered all that, and I've been watching on and off as this stuff's played out. When this most recent thing happened, I saw the vote coming up, and I was watching what the ILCA class was putting out, what Farzad was putting out, what the foreign groups, Europe, the Australians, Italians, Japanese, everyone was making their public statements. But at the end of the day, there was a vote. And you know what? You know who votes? As we saw last time around in America, you know who goes and votes? Who goes and votes, Tom?
The people who care.
The people who are pissed off. They're the ones that go and vote.
Oh, you're saying that's why Trump got elected?
That's why it's pretty obvious that's why Trump got elected. People who are angry at the way things are the ones who are most motivated. When you do turnout analysis of places, that's what you find. And when you look at, I bet you, and I have no information about this, I haven't spoken to anyone at the laser class or at Laser Performance or at World Sailing, but I bet you if you look at those ballots coming back, even though, a majority of laser sailors are in Europe, I bet you a majority of the votes came from the United States, because even though they had a great ballot result compared to anything else in history, it's still a fraction of the overall membership.
Okay, so why, assuming you're right, and I don't necessarily disagree, and we know here. Let me put this guy on, so Farzad Rastiger, and I had him on the show. You watched that segment, right?
I watched. I skipped around a little bit, but yeah, I listened to enough of it to understand.
And we had a nice long 2-hour chat, and it's very interesting. And out of that came, and I asked him point blank. I said, "What about these lasers that are up in Kingston, Ontario, that were imported from Australia rather than from Laser Performance?" And apparently Laser Performance offered to send boats for these regattas that are going on up there. It's the 4.7 Junior Worlds, the laser radial.
I think radial's coming up this week.
Junior, I can't remember what's going on, but then apparently the boats from Laser Performance to come into Canada were going to be a couple $1,000s more to charter, or they're going to be considerably more to charter. And they imported instead these PSA, Performance Sailing Australia boats, and supposedly on a carnet, which is the French word meaning import-export. You can import, provided you export it immediately afterwards for certain uses. And it's like when you go to, you go into a country and you take with you your Apple, Julie, you got your laptop with you. You're in effect getting a personal carnet when you go in, because you have to take it back out with you. You can't leave it there and sell it to somebody. At least technically you can't. So these boats were supposedly leaving the country, but now I'm told they're for sale, and I hear they're selling, at least they're taking deposits. And the reason they're selling is because they're a couple thousand less than what it would cost retail for a boat that was built in the UK and brought into the country, or so, again, I'm told. couple $1,000s less to buy one of these boats after the course. There's some depreciation in there because the boats.
So
have
what's
been sailed.
what's the issue though?
Well, I'm not sure there is an issue. I'm just pointing this out, and I'm going to ask you what's the issue, and then I want to ask you about this. Is the class really going to change the name from what you hear? Are they going to be called the Ilka dinghy, or are they going to be called something else? They're going to continue. I mean, a rose by any other name smells as sweet, right?
A few months ago, the class made a statement about changing the name, and the members revolted. I think enough people burnt up the secretary's phone that the class stepped back from that, and that's why they didn't include a name change proposal in the recent ballot. I think. But I would guess if they're going to change the name, then they're going to ask the members what the name should be. That's what I would do, you know?
Well, it makes sense.
I mean,
the members are ultimately going to have to vote on the name, aren't they? Can the board do that themselves?
They probably could, but what's the downside to letting the members do it? It's good PR. It makes, it's probably the right thing to do. You can veto anything really stupid or that violates IP, or you can call it the Ilka. I don't care. It's a boat. It works. There's lots of them in the world. You can go sailing.
And everyone and their brother and sister are still going to call it the Laser, right?
Of course.
Okay, so what's next? What happens? What's next on this whole saga? It looks like the class, by any name, is sorting itself out with world sailing, as no surprise to me, and I think a lot of other people, no surprise. It will be in the Olympics, obviously, this 2020, and it will continue to be in the Olympics, in my not so humble opinion, in 2024. Do you think it'll get renamed or not? And if so, does that make any difference? And what are the legal implications, Mr. Attorney? I'll put your title back up here.
Well, let me take a step back, because you asked me why I thought Americans would have voted, or North Americans would have voted so much more in larger numbers if they were angry, and that's because the European market's been fairly well served, or at least comparatively well served, by laser performance for the past, call it, a decade, whereas the American market and North American market and South American market, but especially North American, has been really poorly served, as evidenced by comments from, literally hundreds of people over the past few years, and those range from average sailors up to top Olympians, down to national distributors, up to hardware suppliers. No one's got a good thing to say about what.
You're absolutely right. And when you say poorly served, you mean parts are not available, new boats are not available, and if they are, they're quite a bit more expensive than people think they ought to be. Is that? And
service issues, and build issues over the years, and other issues. There's just been a litany of things, and it's never been fixed. So that's all I was saying. And I think going forward, I think now Laser Performance has a real motivation to make a deal that lets them stay part of the game. Otherwise, they have to start something entirely new that isn't in the Olympics, right? So they've got a motivation to make a deal. And I think when his back is against the wall, I think that Mr. Astorgar would probably make a deal. If not, okay, he'll do it out of spite. Fine, then there's plenty of people that can build that boat easily.
And what's the deal? I mean, here the problem is two problems as I see it. They've got to start licensing builders in other places so that you can have boats built in Brazil. You can have a local supply. They should have a builder here, and maybe they have to go to China and build a whole bunch of boats in China and then have distro through the world. Then the other thing that is a problem in the class, from what I hear, and I hear it from our FOSI, our Friends of Sailing Illustrated, week in and week out, say that the boats are different, not only from within a manufacturer, but as between the manufacturers. And we know there was the big supposed scandal about the boats from Australia being better in certain ways. We know that there's just been, unrelated to this, there's just been some boats built in China for the Club 420 class that showed up here in the U.S. and were completely out of class. And the class, they were running their C420 Nationals or North Americans here in San Francisco a few weeks ago, and they discovered how differently the boats were stiffer, and the boats had this and that, and they were lighter by quite a bit. And we know that the lasers have as well. Now, I guess you know this, Alan, but out there at Portage Lake, where I grew up, we used to be one of the biggest laser dealers in in the country, in that part of in the country, not just in the Midwest, and sunfish dealers and so on and so forth. And when the boats would come in, hot, competitive young sailors, we would weigh the things and try to find what was the lightest boat and what was maybe the stiffest boat. We weren't sophisticated enough, this is a long time ago, to know that the mast rake was different, that how that they glued when they put the deck on and that thing, how the mast rate can vary because of the well into which the base of the mast goes.
Yeah.
So we know the boats are different. These boats, it seems to me, sooner or later, this class has got to start weighing and doing a swing test, a land belay test, to be sure that the boats are, and some classes make them put inspection ports in, and so they can look in there with an endoscope and be sure that there hasn't been internal stiffening and so on. Doesn't the class have to do that?
Here's what I think. I don't know if they have to do it or not, because I'm not familiar enough at all with what's gone on in the construction and with the measurement of the different boats. But here's what I do know: this process by which they've become sort of independent of laser performance allows them to do a few things. It allows them to put out a call for bids and proposals, which they've already done, I think, and gotten, according to a release a couple months ago, dozens of interested builder parties, including a bunch of them that we both know very well, if you looked at the list, reputable builders from all over the world. It allows them to put a process in place by which those builders can be bound to inspection, to verification, to measurement, to all these different clauses that maybe don't exist in the current agreements, or maybe aren't as polished as they could be. This allows them to basically reboot the process. I mean, I would argue that it's a great time to update the laser construction manual and bring it into more of a modern world in terms of production, in terms of dropping prices and maybe improving longevity of the boats. But, I'm not really a laser sailor, so it's my opinion on that's worthless. But I mean, if I was a class, other than all this difficulty they had to deal with, I'd be thinking that I was in a pretty good position to make the kind of changes that can make the laser endure, in the Olympics and as a standard for single-handed boats for like another couple decades easy,
I hope so. I think
about laser is, Tom? The laser is how many years old? A half a century old. What's the coolest thing about it? It still looks like a fast sailboat.
And it's fun to sail.
Isn't that weird? Think of another boat that's 50 years old that still looks like a fast sailboat.
Well, a Star does.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
It's kind of square now, but the laser, because of the rake of the mast.
Star is wonderful.
Ices.
Huh?
Because the rake of the mast, because of the incredibly low freeboard of a laser, it just looks sleeker than most boats from that period. And I think that's one of the things that's important to the Olympics.
Well, it certainly looks sleeker than a sunfish, which is what it essentially replaced. And there are some people who think it looks like an ironing board.
Ironing boards look fast too.
Okay. All right, let's see what our foes have to say here, because a lot of other, Karen Robertson over in Scotland has joined. Jason Mark is saying that blackboard photo is an old one from December 2017, so it's not relevant to the current voting. And Alex Saldana saying the question on the voting was misleading, Tom. Let's go back to the voting. You and I both heard from the class presidents, from the office, from other people on that international council about what supposedly the vote was. And who is going to do this independent audit? Do we know?
No idea.
And are you confident, in sitting there and knowing the people and knowing the situation as well as you do, are you confident that this vote was on the up and up, irrespective of Jean-Pierre Keegan's concerns about SurveyMonkey and some of these other things?
I'm 100% confident. These are really trustworthy people. Like, these are not people who are scammers. They don't have production companies. They're not making deals with the laser. Like, there's not any of that shadiness that you see when you get to sort of cup level stuff or some of the big tours where everyone's got their finger in a pot. These are people who love like you talk to Tracy, like, these are people who love the sport and sail lasers, and their kids sail lasers, and you know what I mean?
Yep.
So no, I don't. It's a lot easier to suspect the people that have financial interests, significant financial interests, rather than the people that are doing this. The vast majority of them as volunteers, and even the ones that are paid do it because they're really good friends with the volunteers.
Yeah, and Bill Wingrove points out that the Sunfish class, which the Sunfish is also built and the IP is owned by the same Laser Performance, that they've had problems, and there's a big struggle going on between that class and Laser Performance, and that Bill Wingrove reminds us. Alan Pryor is watching, by the way. Hi, Trev. And Sarah Rentz, there's a new name, Ali Dinas. Anyone remember when some UK org ran a contest to name a ship, and the winning entry ended up being Booty McBoatface? Bodie McBoatface. Maybe Ilka could try that with a class name. May get a similarly awesome name. Julie, do you think that's a good idea?
No.
What's Bodie McBoatface? What's that from? It's a movie, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's from a
Alan's,
kids thing.
Alan's cracking up.
Yeah.
Come on. Say it. Say it.
I just snorted. All right. Bodie McBoatface, the British Royal Hydrographic Institute ran a competition to name their new, their new research vessel at 280 foot, whatever it was. And the overwhelming winner was Bodie McBoatface, and it became a hilarious meme around the world. And then they didn't name it that because they didn't want to have to call that over the radio, but they did name their tender, their sub, Bodie McBoatface. And now there is a Royal Hydrographic submarine called Bodie McBoatface that made a major discovery not a month ago. So, yeah, good story. So, yeah, Ilka should do that. They should name it whatever the people decide, even if it's Laser McLaserface.
Well, maybe we should run the contest right here. We'll do it on. We'll do it on sale. I don't, but I'm sure that with this bright group of people we have on here, we could
come up. What about that torch? That wasn't a bad name.
What's that?
What about that torch thing from a few years ago? That wasn't a bad name.
Bruce Kirby wanted to rename it the Torch when he was. Well, that's okay. I somehow think the Laser and Laser Performance, the Ilka, the class that is, the Laser class, they're all going to sit down and they're going to sort this out because it's in everyone's best interest to do just that. And I'm enough of an optimist that I do think that is going to happen. I would like to think that, Alan, that if you or I or Julia or probably a bunch of other people on here could go sit down, maybe, I mean, some of the stuff we've sorted out in the cup world makes this look like child's play. I mean, excuse me. Okay, there's commercial stuff here, but at the end of the day, I do think having now spent some time with him online and off, Mr. Rastiger, I really think he can be and will be a reasonable guy. I think the class can and will and are reasonable people. And World Sailing, if they would sit down, maybe knock some heads together, and maybe they are doing that. I've heard people on both sides saying that World Sailing has been helpful in this process, but we have some news on why that might not go so well here in a minute.
But hang on one second, Tom. Yep. Here's the question I always have, which is I try and look at people's track records for what they do, what they won't do. And at the same time, as a lawyer, there's so many situations where, yeah, it'd be great if people would work it out, but a lot of times other things just get in the way, In this case, just looking at nothing else but the other pots that Mr. Rastigar has his fingers in, fighting, including threatened litigation and arbitration and whatever with the Sunfish class, fighting litigation, whatever with Kirby, fighting and PR battles and who knows litigation with Ilka, the bankruptcy and fighting with over the McLaren stuff,
Let's just clarify that for people who don't know. McLaren, he took the name MC, capital LAREN, which was, of course, the famous race car company, Bruce McLaren, who I used to be with that team, as some of you know, back in the late 90s. Now, representing their title sponsor to McLaren. And he took the name and made it kind of Scottish, MACLAREN, and started a what we would call a buggy company, the Brits would call a prams, right? These are high-end baby buggies, right?
Yeah, basically. And again, we don't need to go into this whole the history of it, but if you look up Rastigar and McLaren, you'll find out what the controversy was. Essentially, there was controversy over a products liability claim and case where a number of children had bad injuries, and the McLaren North America went bankrupt rather than paying those off. And it wasn't until it was picked up by a journalist, I think, and then a whole outcry developed and a boycott against McLaren that those people were paid off. So again, he did the right thing at the end, but I think, it's one of those things where you go, well, if you're caught and you do the right thing, is it really doing the right thing, And if you look at these other cases, it just looks like Mr. Astigar is okay with conflict. Okay. And that's not a recipe for coming to solutions, is people who kind of live in conflict,
Well, and I hope that's not the case, because we don't need that. The class doesn't need it, and the sport doesn't need it, especially in Olympic sport. I'm going to run through some comment. We're boring Jody Shields. He says this is getting to be like, if you think Sail GP is boring, he said this laser discussion, he says, is getting boring. By the way, Bruce Nelson is watching, and for Nelson, because we talked I said to Bruce, or I said to Alan, I said, you're in Beverly Hills, Michigan, and that really does exist. There's a suburb, a little, it's a village, really, isn't it, between Birmingham and Bloomfield and Royal Oak, someplace in the northwest suburbs of Detroit, right?
Has lots of trees.
Look at that. Home sweet home. There's Michigan. You got any mosquitoes there, Alan?
We have some mosquitoes, but most of all, I plant plants that chase them away. It doesn't really work.
Okay. Well, I was saying to Alan, Julie, before you came down to the studio, I said, he's in Beverly Hills. I should get a picture or a video of Jed Clampett, the Beverly Hillbillies, and say, look, there's Alan Block now with his big full beard. He hasn't taken his hat off yet, so we don't quite know if he's still clean shaven on top.
I don't know if I bothered lately.
And we played that banjo music, the Beverly Hillbillies. And then I said, we met that guy. I was trying to remember his name, and you reminded me. It was Jed Clampett. Julie, you remember the name of the actor?
Uh-huh.
Wasn't it Buddy, right?
Ebsen.
Buddy,
right, exactly. Ebsen. Buddy Ebsen. And when Bruce is on here, Nelson and I were sailing to the University of Michigan in the early 70s. We went to Newport Beach to sail on the first ever collegiate sloop championships. And as part of that function, I'm pretty sure it was then, Buddy Ebsen, who lived in Newport Beach and was a sailor. He was a serious, keen sailor. I think it was there. He invited us over to his house, all the college kids, and we went over and had cocktail. Nelson's on here. He'll remember if that's true or if I'm confusing this with some other regatta. And took us over there, and he had a cat or a try, I'm not sure which, called Polynesian Concept. And I think it's still in Newport Harbor, where there is a boat of that name, because I remember passing it during Gov Cup.
I feel like I might have seen something like that tied up to a house on Lido Island.
Yeah, well, he had a beautiful house, and we had a lot of fun. He was a very nice guy, and we should cast you as Buddy Ebsen in something, Clean.
The Beverly Hillbillies of Michigan.
Ed Furry says scows are old and look fast. That's a good point. I mean, there's nothing that looks cooler than an A scow or an E.
Yeah, you're right about that.
That's a good point.
You're right about that.
Forrest Peterson, hi to you. Roger Lockhart, has anyone told him this is a job interview for the head of world sailing? He's got my vote. Okay.
There you go.
There's a job you don't want, Alan, but apparently Roger thinks you're qualified for it. Alex Saldana makes a good point. Alex says there will be a lot of money involved if the laser class or the ILCA, whatever it is, approves the new rig. And now with this voting, they may have the means for it. So I don't want to get into that. There's two different rigs under development, actually more than that, under development, one an Australian initiative and one a laser performance initiative, PSA, that is Performance Sailing Australia. Neil Collingridge, there's been some spectacular nonsense posted online. Difficult to know what's news and what's fake news. So got to be patient to see how this plays out. Doesn't feel like this is any way sorted yet, though. Anyway, for now, the laser remains the most successful dinghy of all time, whatever it's called, and whomever builds it. Good point from Neil Collingridge. Sangmeister, John is watching. Matt Knighton, Bodie McBoatface is the name of my fantasy football team, Matt Knighton says. Allie D. Na says that New York City hosted a similar contest but asked for submissions from school kids to name the ferries. One is named Lunchbox. Stingray has nominated a name. He wants to call it the Z-Laser, the Z-Laser. Z-Laser. Okay, isn't the Stanford Tree mascot also of a protest vote? Baton Rouge, there's a good, to talk about a nom de plume or a screen name, Baton Rouge, Batton, like a batten in a sail. Isn't the Stanford tree mascot also of a protest vote? Any validity to that? Well, let's ask our Stanford alum here.
It was all in an effort to get away from and solve the problem of being an Indian or a tree.
Because it was originally the cardinal, right?
Yeah.
Which was it the Stanford Indians?
Yes.
Oh, it was Stanford Indians. Then it got changed to the Stanford Cardinal.
It was originally the color cardinal, and then became Indians.
It was okay. And Alan, your hat says CU. I asked you if you're a Buff. You went to Colorado.
Ralphie, my first
UC Boulder, right?
My first dog was named Ralphie. No, I went to University of Colorado School of Law in beautiful Boulder. I'm right nestled underneath the Flatirons. Special place.
Okay. Hadley Allchurch is another new name. Jody Shields
Hadley
says,
Allchurch.
Boy,
that's a name I haven't heard in a decade.
Is that somebody you know?
That's one of sort of the earliest anarchists from Australia, I believe.
Okay, cool. Well, we got a lot of cool people on here. Chris Welsh. Chris was caught up, by the way. I don't know if you know Chris from originally from Newport Beach.
Sure, I know about you.
And C-Dub is also up here, and he's got a marina that he owns and some other stuff here in the Bay Area, and he's become a friend at St. Francis. He was caught up in Hong Kong. I mean, we know a lot of people in Hong Kong, and that I was watching that before we went to air on the tube here. Just that is a scary looking situation. And Chris was caught up there. He finally got out, and I'll have him tell a story sometime. We get him on here. Joe Cool, Matt. No, okay, let's wrap. Ted Ryman down in Cape Town, South Africa says we should name it the Fredo class. The Fredo. Fredo class. Ferdinand von West is watching town. Bud had a cat. Buddy lived on Balboa Island. Roger Lockhart's reminding us. Yeah, he did. Okay. Justin Stingray says, screw those guys who will always be a laser. This is temporary. Yeah, Balboa Island, Tom O'Keefe is saying, Bill Canfield. Dragon. Now, does a dragon look fast?
No.
ICs look like sailboats should, like the pointy end and
crescent. Yeah, ICs. Yeah. Well, that's what a dragon looks like. Okay, let's wrap this up, Alan. And anything else on the laser before we move from this topic? Any questions from anybody that we haven't covered? Probably 9 ways
I'm excited to see what happens. You haven't seen a situation like this where something that really is desirable is being proposed on by builders around the world. We haven't seen that kind of situation outside of really high-end stuff. If you got super yachts or the fastest carbon machine, these builders fight over the right to build it. But little boats, not so much. So we might see a situation where we get to see a process work in a modern way that could really help a class and really help a boat to either improve or come down in price or whatever. But I feel like there's an opportunity to see something we haven't seen in a while in this sport. So it could be a great thing for sailing. And that's all I have to say about that. I'm putting in my time. I'm ready to do a laser masters here in the next year or two. So
good. Okay. Well, if you want to carry on, we're going to move. And Blake Middleton says he's off to run the Minnetonka Yacht Club races, the Wednesday night.
I'm going to get out here too and go play with my little kid.
Okay.
All right. So it's been great to see you, Tom, and thanks to all your viewers for watching. And it's nice to hear some of those names I haven't heard in a long time. Well, much love to you guys, and we'll check in with you in a couple months. All right.
And thank you, Alan. We'll get you back on. I think it's been 4 or 5 months since you were last on. We'll see you again soon. Take good care.
All right. Thanks,
Ciao.
buddy.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so that was Alan Block, as you all know, formerly Mr. Clean. He's still called Mr. Clean. He was the deputy editor of Sailing Anarchy for years. He's a fellow Michigander whom I did not know growing up, Julian, Michigan. He's a few years younger than I, but a keen racing sailor and now a lawyer and cool guy, talking about the latest on the laser. I think we've covered that pretty well, and he will give you a little breaking news that has not been reported yet. World Sailing. As I told you, this is their board, and they had their meeting on August 5th, and they gave a lukewarm statement. It was very soft, but it said it looks like the laser class is doing all the right things. They've signed the papers. It looks like their vote moves things forward. yada yada. And as I said, I took that as a very positive note, and no surprise, because I do think this is cooler heads are going to prevail and this thing will get sorted out. Now, what you don't know is that an internal email was sent around today by the non-sailing CEO. Here's on the left, that is Mr. Hunt, Andy Hunt, who's the World Sailing Chief Executive, and his what the Brits or the Kiwis, the Aussies would call their offside, or their right-hand man or woman, as we would say here in the States. His chief legal officer, John Napier, excuse me, is leaving. Why is that a big deal? Well, because a lot of people think that John, Mr. Napier, whom I don't know, is the power behind the throne, because he's been doing a lot of the legal work and making recommendations that Mr. Hunt and the board took as gospel, and some of which we think, a number of us think, have gotten world sailing into hot water. So there's another person, another senior staff leaving World Sailing. This was the internal email that went out today. Dear stakeholders, I'm writing to update you on a number of personnel changes. John Napier, Director of Integrity and Governance, will be leaving World Sailing in mid-September following his appointment as a judge within the UK judiciary. And now you guys that are snarky will say, well, God save the UK judiciary, but I don't know that John's a bad judge or a bad lawyer. I just don't know. I do think some of the policy recommendations that he made were not correct, but that's another issue. John will continue to support World Sailing on a part-time consulting basis, performing his role in respect of support of the Governance Commission, submissions process, Racing Rules Committee, and acting as the advisor on our processes and procedures to World Sailing at the annual conference in Bermuda this year. So you read between the lines. I think he probably does have another job offer, or is going to find one. But again, World Sailing is in such deep financial problems, has such deep financial problems, that I think this guy now is going away, is coming as, instead of an employee, is now going to be a consultant. They'll pay him something to come in and give advice on a part-time basis. But it's also, I think, an indication that remember, there is an ethics commission proceeding going on right now, where a couple of people have filed complaints against the non-sailing CEO and the president about their conduct of the voting and of these other issues surrounding the dismissal of the Finn from the Olympics. And that is proceeding. It's still going on, and nobody talks about it. They put a gag order on all the participants. I'm not a participant, so I can say what I want. But I really don't know what's going on, because nobody's talking, except that it is going on, and it's been going on now for months. And I suspect this is the first indication that maybe there's it's an indication, I suspect, of some things to come. So, again, they've lost their chief financial officer. Now they're losing their chief legal officer. They lost their chief measurement, the guy who was in charge of measurement. He's gone. And one continues to hear other sorts of rumors, but we'll leave it at that. Okay, let's go to the other side of the world, to Auckland, New Zealand, where my good friend Richard Gladwell, whom I spoke at length yesterday, and he has written in sail-world.com, of which he is the esteemed New Zealand editor. He's talking about these America's Cup World Series events, and he's saying that the worst affected team, because of the teams having to transport their boats around the world for these regattas, which are going to start next April in Cagliari in Italy. He's saying the worst affected team of having their boat tied up on a ship all this time, instead of being at home practicing, is Stars and Stripes Team USA, who, as it stands, have to compete in the April 2020 World Series event and spend more time on a ship than they do in training. Their schedule is so unfair. That's a team that still doesn't really exist. They've got a partially built boat. And anyway, their schedule is so unfair compared to the two boat teams who have a prototype and a second boat. You can build under the rules a maximum of two boats. And the four super teams, as I call them, are all about to splash B1, their first boats, here in the next 4, 6, maybe 8 weeks. But Richard says this is so unfair to a single boat team, because Stars and Stripes says they're only going to build one boat, that the remaining single boat team should, he says, by a protocol change, be excused from racing in the World Series events and told to just turn up in Auckland in late 2020. That was Richard Gladwell writing on sailworld.com on 11 August 19. And I said, Richard, excuse me, you can't be serious that they have a protocol. All the other teams are having to comply with sending their boats around on a ship and going and doing this and going to the huge expense. But just because these guys now have chosen to build one boat, I doubt they're even going to get to the starting line with one boat. But let's just give them the benefit of the doubt. That is Long Beach Yacht Club's Stars and Stripes team, Mike Buckley and Taylor Canfield and co. But now you're going to say, oh, change the protocol so they don't have to show up at these World Sailing events, just World Series events, just because we need them on the starting line in Auckland come 2021.
But that's not what people signed up for.
Well, say it again, Julia.
Yeah, a good idea, but you have to do it before the fact. Everybody else has signed up to that.
Exactly. It just seems so grossly unfair. And then I've talked to a couple other senior series people about this and say, well, Richard looks like he's shilling for Emirates Team New Zealand, who need every team they can get there because they need the support of the city council, of the national government in Wellington, and they promised that there'd be a lot of teams there. And we know the two that signed up of late, both the Dutch and the Maltese, have dropped out, and everyone, including me, is expecting this team to drop out sooner or later. But now to change the rules to make it easier for them to stay in when everybody else has had to live and die by these other rules, excuse me. And I said, Richard, are you serious? He said, no, I really am serious. I think it's the right thing to do. We need more teams, and this will help assure that team. Well, what it does also assure is that if they can make it, that is Long Beach Yacht Club Stars and Stripes team, they will then pay money to the Defender because they haven't made all their payments for the design package that they've bought, and maybe they'll buy more from them. And that's more money into the pockets of the Defender, which does not make the challengers happy, as you can imagine, because they don't think that one of the challengers should be financially helping the Defender. It's a strange situation. Okay, Richard, well, I've said what I said, but I also will point out that Richard also wrote way back, this was back in December, he said, news that that was after the deadline, the late deadline of the last-minute entry deadline, which was November 30th. And on 1st December, Richard wrote, news that there have been a further 8 notices of challenge. We forgot that there were actually 8 for the 36th America's Cup has left most pundits gobsmacked. Well, it certainly didn't leave us gobsmacked. And I've been there and done that, been in that movie, seen all these challenges come in and then seen a lot of them disappear, through attrition and when people realize how expensive, difficult, and heartbreaking it can be to mount one of these things. So after months of explaining away just 3 challenges, this is, again, back in December, Richard wrote, by the way, even though they are the so-called super teams, there is now an avalanche of entries which potentially could see 12 teams competing in Auckland. Richard, okay, you wrote that back in December. There was no way there were ever going to be 12 teams in Auckland, not with a boat that is as complicated and, frankly, challenging and perhaps more than the boat that we've got going now. Okay, so that's some of the latest Cup news. I will also tell you that, confirming what we told you some time ago, last week, that Luna Rossa has changed their splash date for their AC-75 from the 25th of August to the 9th of September. We told you that some time ago. Last week, I guess it was the first week of August, we told you that. And indeed, they've now posted that and said that's coming true. And then we showed you this picture, which we ran on the website, of their new AC-75, and it's shrink-wrapped, and they put in blocks of styrofoam all around it so you disguise the hull shape. And that was leaving the factory at Persico Marine up in Bergamo in Italy and headed to Livorno to go on the ship to arrive about now. I think it's soon to arrive, if it hasn't already, in Cagliari down in Sardinia, where the Luna Rossa team base is located. And that was as it was leaving last Thursday night. And then we told you that the teams had received their foil arms, built also by Persico Marine for all the teams, at least the super teams, the 3 big challengers and the Defender, Emirates Team New Zealand. and that there were some problems with those foil arms. I've had that confirmed to me by principals of 3 teams. And there was some delamination, and probably minor, probably not a big deal, but the teams who they bought these foil arms, they had to pay for them they bought them from Persico, and now they're repairing them apparently to their own satisfaction. And we'll see how that all goes and what the class rules committee thinks of the repairs and so on. So that is going on. And I can also tell you, as we did last week, that was curses foiled again, because these things are long delayed. And it's because these things now have to be not just received, but they have to be repaired. And that's going to take even more time. So we'll see if Luna Rossa actually splashes on the 9th of September, as they said they would. I think you're going to find even further delays to the splashing of boats by New York Yacht Club's American Magic and by Sir Ben Ainsley's Ineos Team UK, because of having to repair now these foil arms. Hopefully that's the end of it. Hopefully they're now robust and they've been tested at the factory in Bergamo by the teams themselves. And hopefully this is going to end this, it's been a 6-month delay, basically. It's really set things back. Now, I've also heard a couple rumors, and it's only rumors. I've heard that the test boat of Luna Rossa did an augered in and somehow damaged the spine of the boat, broke the back of the boat. I have talked with representatives from Luna Rossa, the Challenger record. They tell me that is not true. They tell me the boat did auger in, they did take it out of the water, then they fixed it, or whatever, it wasn't a problem. They then sailed it some more. Now, the reason they're not sailing that boat, they say, is because they are full speed ahead, getting ready to launch their first AC-75 on the 9th of September. So that makes perfect sense. And I will take them at their word that their test boat did not break, although there are rumors to the contrary, Julia. We're also hearing that a couple of the teams may be training together this winter. And I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not going to say more than that because I haven't been able to confirm that. And I want to check with the teams themselves, but I do know in New York Yacht Club's American Magic have announced long ago that they're heading back to Pensacola, Florida, to train down there in latter months of this year. They can sail, assuming they get their AC-75 in the water sometime soon. I don't know when that will happen, but they can sail probably through the end of October fairly comfortably in Newport, Rhode Island, before packing up and heading back down to Pensacola. But one hears there's some other warm weather training that's going to go on involving 2 of the teams, and we'll fill you in on that when we know more. And you can say you heard it first here, if in fact that comes to fruition and one hears. More on that. Okay, now here's an interesting video that Team New Zealand released today, or in the last 24 hours, and it's also about the foil arms, and it's about them taking delivery of their foil arms in Auckland.
Yeah, we got the foil arms have just arrived here from Italy. The whole team's been waiting for this for quite a while, so I think we'll get a couple of guys and get a crane and go for it. Yeah, they look packaged pretty well. Nothing seems untoward. Out of the box, on the ground. Now we've got a couple of weeks to get them into shape. And there's pressure on now. I think it's going to be day shift, night shift. Every stage that we can get done in a day, we'll aim for that. There'll be a few cooks along the way and secondary bonding.
Okay, there you've got your first look at foil arms, courtesy of Emirates Team New Zealand. I see they've added a tagline. Look at that on their logo. It says, Emirates, fly better. I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. Okay, so they've got their foil arms. I'm told all the other teams, or at least the other 3 challengers do, not Stars and Stripes Team USA. They don't have their foil arms yet. And I frankly, I don't see how that team makes it. I just don't see how they're ever going to make it. As much as I'd like to see them make it and have 2 American teams, I think the chances again of that are more likely that Julia or I will be the next Queen of England. Okay, so let's see what the rest of you say, and then we'll wrap this one up. We're in hour and 40.
Yeah.
It was great to have Alan on,
Yeah.
wasn't it? Janice,
He's wonderful. Yeah.
Janice F. Davis, my beloved mother, is watching. Hi, Mom. Joan Winston, change the protocol before the team in question has demonstrated financial capacity to even build a boat. Well, they partially built a boat, Joan, but they're saying, oh, we're about to land. I hear they say they're about to land a sponsor of 8 figures, so in the tens of millions of dollars. But they got to raise 40 or 50 or 60 million dollars just to really make it to the starting line. And they've run out of time. I mean, to be competitive, to be decent, it's just. I admire Mike Buckley's pluck, his determination, his drive, and hopefully it's sort of like one of these candidates in the Democratic primaries that they got 20 candidates in these debates, and they know that most of them don't have a snowball's chance, but they get their name out there, and Mike and hopefully Taylor will be involved in future Cup campaigns after the experience of this one. Joan Winston, what money? Andrew Ferguson, would be better to scrub the lead-up races to offset the delays of the foil arms. Well, then there's the question of how many of these ACWS, America's Cup World Series regattas are going to be. There's for sure going to be the one in Colliery at the end of April next year. And I've seen clubs sending out paperwork already. Hey, join us. We're going to take, those are the clubs that are involved in the Cup, who have teams involved in the Cup. And I think this event in Colliery is going to be, well, it's the first time we'll see these boats race. I'm sure they're going to all be on tender hooks, and they're going to be very careful how they sail the boats. But they sure don't want to load them up too heavily, and they don't want to run into anybody with them. But it's going to be interesting, and the whole eyes of the world will be watching to see these amazing water bugs racing for the first time in Colliery in next April. The question is, how many other regattas are going to be run? There's supposed to be 3 regattas under the protocol. In the protocol, 3 regattas next year. They've already amended it down from whatever it was, 5, 1 this year and 5 next year, I can't remember, to now just 3 next year. And my guess is they're going to run the one in Colliery, and then everybody's going to beat cheeks for Auckland, and they'll run 2 in Auckland. 2 in Auckland. That's my guess as of conversations I've had with a number of people in the past 36 hours. And I rather suspect that the idea of there being a regatta someplace else in Europe or on the east or the west coast of the U.S. is simply not going to come to fruition because there ain't time. And most of the teams just want to spend as much time training with these wild new boats, training as possible. So, Andrew, I think there's a lot of agreement with you. Ray Schuler is watching with you. Richard Gladwell. Hello, Richard. I still love you, man. I really do. And I'll get you on the show again. Actually, Richard's agreed to come back on the show.
Good.
Sometime soon. We've got so many people already booked. I should, on Friday, I'll tell you who all's booked to come on in the next few days. In fact, Jody Shields, if you're still watching, you said you would come on this Friday, and I've got you not just penciled in, I've got you inked in for this Friday. Jody Shields, tell us about SailGP. If Alan runs into Doyle Downey in Beverly Hills, tell him I said hello. I think Alan's already off, Clark, so you better text him. Joan Winston, so was the foil arm pair in the ETNZ video delaminated on arrival, or was it delivered fixed? I don't know the answer to it. I don't know for sure it was theirs was delaminated. I'm told it was. And I'm told it was delaminated. Of the 4, I've heard reports of how badly delaminated each of the 4 were, but I'm not going to go into that because I really don't know, and I don't want to repeat stuff that's, frankly, I haven't confirmed with 2 or 3 other sources. Margarita Marshall, training is in 2, that is 2 teams training together, is prohibited by the protocol. Yes, it is. I think going out and actually hooking up and racing side by side is prohibited by the protocol. But what beyond that is prohibited, I don't know. One other point about this whole thing, if Stars and Stripes Team, since you're all making comments about it, Stars and Stripes Team USA, let's say they don't change the protocol, And let's say that Stars and Stripes raises enough money to get to the event, and they just skip. They just say, to hell with it. We're going to skip going to Colliery. So they break the protocol. What's the penalty? The penalty is the ARB panel, somebody will protest them, take them to the arbitration panel. The ARB panel can decide to do nothing, levy a fine, or disqualify them from, excuse them from further participation, as New York Yacht Club used to say during the defense trials back in the 60s and 70s. And a lot of people are thinking, you know what? The ARB panel might just let him get off the hook. They want to,
a 360.
You got to get closer there.
Make him do a 360 and get on with it.
A 720 or something, slap on the wrist. I don't think that'll happen, but a lot of people think, they might front up. They might just they might get their team together. They might just say, we're not going to Colliery. We're not going to go there. Now penalize us. That'll be an interesting situation.
Yeah, because that's not proscribed.
Well, it's a requirement that teams show up in Colliery for these.
It is
for the pre-regatta. Yeah. In fact, all the pre-regattas.
Yeah,
that is required. But then, as everything else in life, what's the penalty?
Oh yes.
What's the penalty? Okay, enough of all that. Final run through the comments, if any. There aren't. With that, I want to thank everybody who gave us video and images today for today's show. A lot of you did, as usual. Thank all of you. A big crowd on here today. I thank, of course, Alan Block, who came on, and it was a lot of fun catching up with him. One of the great guys in the sport. I leave you with this thought that was sent by one of our foes. I haven't said who because I'm not sure they wanted me to know, but you got to love this. Mom, you got to love this too. I heard the more colorful your salad is, the better it is for you, so I swapped my croutons for M&Ms. And I think if we weren't if we weren't on a zero carb diet, we would go have some M&Ms peanut right now, right? We've stopped eating those. Okay, thanks everybody. Thanks for joining us today, and we will be back, God and Facebook and the internet willing, on Friday, same time, same channel, and we are working on switching either over to YouTube or it's live streaming on YouTube as well. Hope you can join it. Julie, anything?
No. Happy weekend.
Good. And thank you for letting us off the hook on the postponement. You can now see why we wanted to postpone and get some facts correct, get everything copacetic, and have Alan on the show, which I think was great. Hope to see you Friday. In the meantime, sail fast, sail safe, have fun. Ciao.